The river had always moved, even in the driest months, even when heat lay across the savannah like a smothering blanket, even when the land cracked open beneath the sun, this river never fully stopped. It slowed, it thinned, it hid beneath reeds or undercut banks, but it moved. It whispered against stones. It tugged gently at mud. It carried insects and leaves and the memories of storms. But today it did none of that. A golden jackal named Raffi crept toward the riverbank with slow, calculating steps. His paws sank into powder-dry soil where damp earth should have been. The mud along the waterline had hardened into a pale crust that cracked into flakes when touched. Grass at the edge had wilted into thin, brittle wires. He approached cautiously, ears pricked. The water lay flat. Not calm, flat. A polished, unmoving surface, so perfectly still it looked solid. Not a single ripple, not a breath of wind disturbing it, not even a bubble rising. Raffi's instincts twitched uneasily. Water that doesn't move is wrong. Water that can't move is dangerous. He leaned forward to sniff. Normally the river carried scents: rot, reeds, fish, distant soil, the sharp tang of migrating hippos. But today Raffi smelled almost nothing. The faintest touch of algae, but no life underneath. No shifting currents to churn the scents upward. He took another step and peered at the surface. His reflection stared back, too clean, too sharp, like a sheet of dark metal. Raffi growled softly under his breath. A jackal trusted movement. A jackal read the world through vibrations, but the river gave him none. He flicked his paw against the edge. A drop separated, hung on the pad of his paw, and slid back unnaturally slowly, as though the surface tension clung too tightly. Raffi pulled away quickly. Behind him, dry reeds rattled. Two impalas approached warily, heads low, sides heaving with heat-stressed breaths. They stopped several meters from the river, sniffing, stamping nervously. One ventured closer, but when it saw the water unmoving, it balked and stepped back sharply, shaking out its legs as if repelled. Raffi's ears swiveled. Something else was wrong. He scanned the riverbank. Birds that normally cluttered the shallows were absent. No herons stalking fish, no warblers hopping among reeds, no dragonflies. The insects that usually danced above the surface at dusk were missing entirely. Only silence. And heat. Raffi lifted his head toward the sky. Clouds had gathered earlier, heavy with promised rain, but instead of shading the land, they simply hovered, trapping warm air beneath them. The temperature near the ground rose until every breath tasted like baked sand. He paced along the bank, nose low. Something metallic glinted ahead. Humans. Raffi froze, narrowing his eyes. A group of them stood near a row of instruments planted along the river's edge. Tripods held mounted sensors, some pointing toward the water, others toward the sky. A small generator hummed weakly. Two humans knelt beside a cylindrical probe pulled halfway from the river. One shook his head, pointing at the probe's readings. Raffi heard fragments of their voices, carried sluggishly on thick air. Flow has stopped entirely. Oxygen levels near zero. It's stratifying, not mixing. Subsurface current collapse. Another human gestured toward the downstream bend. If the blockage is internal, we won't see movement until pressure changes. Animals are already leaving. Raffi didn't understand the words, but he understood tone. They were afraid. The river wasn't behaving naturally. He crouched lower, slipping between dead reeds. The human scent annoyed him, but he ignored it. He wanted to see more. He climbed an exposed root and gazed further upstream. That's when he saw it. The river narrowed into a steep, silent channel. And beyond that, a stretch of water discoloured into murky brown. Sediment floated suspended, unmoving. Logs stuck half-submerged didn't drift. Even foam clumps sat frozen in place. It was as if the river had turned into a basin of trapped water, not flowing, not breathing. Raffi's fur bristled. Rivers die slowly, everyone knew that. But this wasn't death. This was paralysis. He hopped down from the root, scanning the banks again. A hyena stood on the opposite side, head tilted, eyes anxious. Normally she would have crossed immediately to chase him. Today she only watched the water, ears flattened, uneasy in a way predators rarely showed. Even she recognized danger that wasn't predator-made. Raffi sniffed again, deeper. He smelled trapped heat rising off the surface. He smelled decaying algae underneath. He smelled the faint, sour sting of water losing oxygen. He backed away. Animals that approach dead water risk becoming dead themselves. A rumble travelled through the ground, faint, almost imperceptible. The surface of the river trembled for a fraction of a second, then stilled again, returning to that unnatural, suffocating calm. The humans reacted instantly. One shouted, "There! Did you see that tremor? The bottom shifted." Another pointed at the riverbed. "Sediment plug is getting denser. It's locking the flow." A third raised his voice. "The inlet upstream is completely cut off. No movement means no aeration." Raffi didn't need translation. Something beneath the river was blocking it. Not drought, not pollution. Something structural. A shift. A collapse. A sediment wall rising from below, trapping the water in place. He paced backward up the slope until he reached a patch of firmer earth. His paws no longer felt the strange tremble of the riverbank. Behind him, a flock of bee-eaters landed on a bare tree, restless and chattering, confused by the still water. Raffi looked over his shoulder one last time. The river surface remained perfectly flat, like dark stone, like a mirror refusing to break. Water should move, it should breathe, it should stir with wind and life and current. But this river stayed locked in suffocating silence. A river that cannot move, cannot live. And Raffi understood, from instinct deeper than thought, that once a river stops, the entire land around it begins to follow. Raffi retreated from the riverbank until the soil beneath his paws felt steady again. But even there the air carried the same heavy stillness. No breeze flowing along the channel, no cool breath rising from the water like it had for his entire life. The silence pressed around him like thick cloth. He sat back on his haunches and scanned the landscape. Normally, the riverbank buzzed with life. Frogs calling, waterbirds hunting, hoofbeats of migrating herds approaching cautiously to drink. Today, everything had emptied out. The river did not murmur or shift. It did not send tiny currents brushing against reeds. It did not even make the faint sucking sound that came when the mud pulled at receding water. It lay there, suffocating in its own stillness. Raffi's ears twitched sharply. A small splash, but not the kind a fish makes. It sounded more like a bubble bursting deep beneath the surface. He inched closer again, peering toward the stagnant water. He couldn't see movement, but he smelled it. The faint, sharp scent of decaying organic matter rising from depths that had gone anaerobic. Dead zones. He didn't know the term, but he knew the danger. Behind him, a stork landed heavily near the bank. Its legs sank into the mud, which didn't yield with the usual wet squelch. It crumbled like powdered clay. The bird lifted its feet with difficulty, shook off the dry flakes, and stretched its wings nervously. Its long beak dipped toward the water, but recoiled immediately. Even the blind instincts of wading birds rejected this place. Raffi circled farther upstream. Here the river narrowed into a tight bend, usually turbulent with swirling eddies where fish gathered in cooler pockets. Today, those eddies were gone. The water formed one unbroken, glossy sheet that looked almost artificial. He stepped closer and touched the surface again with the tip of his paw. This time, a thin film stuck to his fur. Not oil, but concentrated algae residue, cooked under unmoving heat. He shook his paw violently and backed away, fur bristling. The water wasn't just still. It was thickening. A rumbling vibration rippled under his feet. Raffi froze. The sound was faint, but the earth responded to it. Dust shifted in thin patterns. A loose stone rolled an inch downhill. The river, for a heartbeat, quivered. The humans reacted immediately. There it is again. The subbed layer is collapsing inward. Pressure is building under the sediment. Raffi heard something metallic clanging. He looked toward the researchers. One of them hammered a long metal rod into the riverbank, while another monitored a device that beeped in irregular intervals. A woman shouted into a radio. Flow interruption is complete. Oxygen depletion accelerating. If we don't open the channel soon, the ecosystem will start dying off. Raffi didn't need their words. He could smell the truth. Rot. Stagnation. Lack of breath beneath the surface. He stepped back again, but the river held him in its strange, eerie pull, not drawing him closer, but refusing to behave like anything he recognized. Animals gathered warily at the edges. A family of warthogs approached, snouts probing the ground. One adult tested the river's edge with her tusks, then jerked back and snorted aggressively at the unmoving water. Raffi watched the warthogs circle, squealing in low distress before finally turning and trotting away toward distant hills. Above, a pair of hornbills circled silently, not landing. They were searching. Everything was searching. Raffi lifted his nose. The air temperature dropped slightly, not enough to bring relief, but enough to signal something shifting in the larger environment. He looked up. Clouds formed far to the east, dark, heavy, rolling like a bruised horizon. But as they approached the river valley, the movement slowed. The air near the ground remained trapped, still, hot. The clouds flattened into a stretched sheet above, refusing to collapse downward into rain. Somewhere above the river, the atmosphere was sealed. Every living creature felt it. Raffi continued upstream until the river curved into a deeper basin. Here the water should have been cool and shaded, stirred by natural slope. Instead, the basin was even more unnaturally motionless, a dead mirror. A dragonfly hovered briefly above the surface. Its wings beat frantically, but no ripples appeared beneath it. Then the dragonfly dropped to the water. It didn't drown, it simply touched the surface and stuck there, wings trapped by the thickened film. It writhed, vibrating the motionless mirror, until it grew tired and surrendered to stillness. Raffi watched it, ears flat. He turned his head as a faint gurgling reached him from deep underwater. Not a splash, more like air escaping through tightening mud. He moved to a higher bank for a better view. The water shifted for the first time, not with flow, but with a lazy, heavy bulge as trapped gas pushed upward. The surface domed, then sagged inward again. One of the humans shouted, "That's methane release from decomposition. The bottom is starved of oxygen. The stratification is complete. This river is suffocating from underneath." Another pointed at a map. The blocking structure is expanding. If it rises another meter, downstream habitats will collapse. Raffi couldn't see their map, but he understood collapse. He made a quiet, uneasy growl, almost whisper-like in the heavy air. The river's scent thickened further, sour, stagnant, lifeless. Fish that tried to approach the surface turned sideways and retreated, their bodies moving sluggishly in the thickening water. A catfish struggled near the edge, gulping at the faint hope of oxygen, but the air carried no relief. Raffi turned sharply as something cracked behind him. A portion of the riverbank sagged as the hardened mud layer broke under its own weight. Chunks collapsed into the water, but instead of splashing, they slid into it silently, sinking without sending ripples. Silence. Everywhere, silence. A silence too absolute to belong to a living river. Raffi backed away, paws digging into dry soil, body tense. He didn't run yet, but every instinct inside him nudged toward escape. He cast a final glance at the river. The surface reflected the sky with unnatural clarity. Wrong, perfect, unnatural. A flat, unmoving scar where life once stirred. Water that cannot stir, cannot feed, cannot breathe, cannot live. And with every moment, the river's glassy suffocation spread further. The land would follow, the animals would follow, even the air would follow, until something forced the blockage to break or everything downstream learned what stillness truly meant. Raffi turned away at last, choosing higher ground, ears pinned back as the river lay behind him, not flowing, not whispering, not living, just waiting in dead silence for change that would not come.